Sometime later, Abraham was told, Milcah is also a mother. She has borne sons to your brother Nahor. Uz, the firstborn, Buz, his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Kesed, Hazor, Pildash, Jidlah, and Bethuel. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. Milcah bore these 8 sons to Abraham's brother Nahor. His concubine, whose name was Reumah, also had sons, Tebah, Gaham, Tahash, and Maachah. Sarah lived to 127 years old. She died at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and to weep over her. Then Abraham rose from beside his dead wife and spoke to the Hittites. He said, I am a foreigner and a stranger among you. Sell me some property for a burial site here so that I can bury my dead. The Hittites replied to Abraham, Sir, listen to us. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will refuse you his tomb for burying your dead. Then Abraham rose and bowed down before the people of the land, the Hittites, and he said to them, If you are willing to let me bury my dead, then listen to me and intercede with Ephron, son of Zohar, on my behalf, so that he may sell me the cave at Machpelah, which belongs to him and is at the end of his field. Ask him to sell it to me for the full price as a burial site among you. Ephron, the Hittite, was sitting among the people, and he replied to Abraham in the hearing of all the Hittites who had come to the gates of the city, No, my lord, he said, listen to me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead. Again, Abraham bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to the Ephron in his hearing, Listen to me. If you will, I will pay the price of the field. Accept it from me so that I can bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, Listen to me, my lord. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. And what is that between you and me? Bury your dead. Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms and weighed out for him the price he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weight current among the merchants. So Ephron's field in Machpelah, near Mamre, both the field and the cave in it, and all the trees within the border of the field was legally made over to Abraham as his property in the presence of all the Hittites who came to the gate of the city. Afterwards, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which is at Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave in it were legally made over to Abraham by the Hittites as a burial site. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks, Christian, for the dramatic reading. Please do keep Genesis 23 open in front of you as we look at it together. Have you ever wondered what the day of your death will be like? So that's a blunt start to the sermon. Thanks for that. I know lots of us want to try and ignore death, but it is inevitable. Sarah is 127 years old. Maybe people thought she's going to go on forever. But then verse 2, she died. Death comes to everyone. So what is our hope in life and death? If you have thought about the day of your death at all, I imagine it would have been something along the lines of having lived a really good last season of your life, comfortable, rest, recreation, maybe even a bit of travel. You then have a peaceful death in your own home, surrounded by your loved ones, leaving behind a good reputation, and being able to pass on some sort of inheritance, maybe not a huge estate, but something so the people you love don't have to worry. Read any Richard Osman murder mystery, you'll see he captures this hope very well. And it is this hope, isn't it, that has driven many to pursue the assisted suicide legislation. They want dignity in their death. But what about Sarah? I mean, she definitely lived a long life. And she is surrounded by some loved ones, maybe two. We're not quite sure because her son Isaac isn't actually mentioned, just her husband weeping as he lies next to her dead body. She's certainly not in her own home. She is in her own tent, but that's not quite the same. She has done lots of traveling, but it seems mainly out of necessity. Her last season of life has been anything but restful, spending her last days wandering through a land that she has been promised, but as yet she doesn't own 1 square inch of it. And that is all because, verse 4, Sarah was, and Abraham still is, a foreigner and a stranger. And life for a foreigner and a stranger is very fragile. But Abraham shows us here in Genesis 23 that for the foreigner, in the face of the fragile, they can have eternal hope. They can put their faith in the eternal. And things do feel very fragile in this passage. The family line feels fragile. That's what this paragraph at the end of chapter 22 is all about. We get the list of Abraham's nephews that have been born to his brother. Yes, it introduces us to the origins of Rebekah. She's going to be important soon because she's going to be the wife of Isaac. But there seems to be more than that going on here. Verse 23, Milcah bore these 8 sons to Abraham's brother Nahor. At the end of the chapter, you've got these 8 sons. At the beginning of chapter 22, verse 2, you've got Abraham with his son, his one and only son. 8 verses 1. Now you would think that it would be Nahor that was the one who was going to have the great family. But actually that's been promised to Abraham. He's the one that's going to have lots of offspring, that great nation. But it's 8 verses 1. The line of promise is looking very fragile. And Abraham is looking fragile, isn't he? There he is, weeping, lying next to his wife's lifeless body. He's on his own. The lady that has been his helper and his soulmate and his partner for over 100 years has gone. Some of us know only too well the pain and the loneliness that can come with that tragedy. Abraham cuts a grief-stricken figure. He seems very fragile. And the inheritance of the land seems very fragile. Okay, end of the chapter, verse 17. Ephron's field, in wherever that place is, near Mamre. Both the field and the cave in it, and all the trees within the borders of the field were legally made over to Abraham. Great. He's got a field with some trees and a cave. It's hardly the length and breadth of the promised land, is it? And he had to work pretty hard to negotiate this bit of land. Oh, it seems very fragile. What about you? Life ever feel fragile for you? Finances, friendships, home, job, do they ever feel fragile? And actually, in a time like this, with an unstable and slow economy, with an unstable world situation, things can feel very fragile. But there are greater things than just that going on here in Genesis 23. It's not just stuff that feels fragile, it's the promises of God that seem fragile, the offspring and the land. See, remember the question that Genesis keeps posing to us. Can we trust God? Well, can we trust God even when things seem fragile? Maybe when some of his promises to you seem fragile. I will build my church. That can feel very fragile at times, can't it? He will complete the work that he's begun in you. And you look at your life sometimes and you think, really? I will lose none, says Jesus. Really? Maybe I'm the one that will slip out of your hand. I will come for you. Is he coming? Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and everything else you need will be given to you. Really? because it's not feeling like that at the moment. But here's the thing, people of faith, people who follow God, including those of us here today, we are foreigners and strangers like Abraham. And life for the foreigner and the stranger can feel very fragile. So verse 3 and 4, Abraham rose from beside his dead wife and spoke to the Hittites. He said, I am a foreigner and stranger among you. Sell me some property for a burial site here so that I can bury my dead. Abraham says, I'm a foreigner and a stranger. He knows that these people he's talking to are not his people. He knows that the land, although promised to him, is not his, and that he is a wanderer. He is an outsider. He is a foreigner, and he is a stranger. And that idea is a theme that runs right through the Bible. The theme that God's people are foreigners and strangers in this world. So Leviticus 23, verse 25, we're told, God says, the land must not be sold permanently. So he's telling the Israelites that when they get into the promised land, they can't permanently sell their land off to another person. Why? Because, says God, the land is mine. And you reside in my land as foreigners and strangers. The earth is the Lord and everything in it. It's his, not yours, not mine. We're foreigners and strangers. Psalm 39 verse 12, David says, hear my prayer, Lord. Listen to my cry for help. Do not be deaf to my weeping. I dwell with you as a foreigner, a stranger, as all my ancestors were. And it's not just the status for the Old Testament believer, it's the status for the New Testament believer as well. 1 Peter 2, verse 11, dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from the sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Now, we said before, many of us here this morning, we know what this feels like in a physical sense. We are foreigners, if you like, in the UK, and we can feel like strangers. We can feel like strangers culturally. We can feel like strangers to the climate, although actually I think it's the natives that are feeling like strangers to the climate at the moment. Or actually we just feel the instability, the fragility that comes with not having the rights and privileges of someone who is a native. But here's the thing, a person of faith, a follower of the Lord, a follower of Yahweh, we are foreigners and strangers wherever we go in this world. And God intends us to be that, and he intends us to live in a way that reflects that. He wants us to live in a way that's appropriate to our status as foreigners and exiles. And that includes when we face different tests and trials. Now, sometimes those tests and trials are due to our faith. They're due to what we might call the extraordinary trials of faith. The things that we saw in Genesis 22 last week, where Abraham is tested with the sacrificing of Isaac. But sometimes these tests and trials, they're just the ordinary but painful, everyday trials that every person on this world faces because we live in a world that is cursed by sin, like chapter 23, the death of your loved one. You know, as people of faith, the blessings we receive don't insulate us from the normal but painful trials of the world. And there will be many of us in this church, if not all of us, who can testify to that truth, that despite our faith, we have still had to face pain and loss and disappointments and health issues and unexpected tragedies. Some of us are even in the middle of some of those things right now. The reality of this world is that life is fragile, that it can be significantly changed and impacted in an instant, that it can be taken away without warning. And we've seen that even this week, haven't we, in the death of the Liverpool footballer, Jota. There he is, all the money, at the peak of his powers. He's as fit as you can be. He's in apparently one of the best clubs in the world. And in an instant, tyre blowout, dead. Life is fragile. A Premiership footballer with all his resources are not immune from that, and neither are we as the people of faith. And so we shouldn't be surprised when the ordinary trials come our way, but it is also okay to feel the pain of them. Should our faith make a difference to how we respond in these trials? Yes, absolutely it should, but faith doesn't anesthetize us from the pain of those trials. So we can lie down next to the lifeless body of our loved one and weep. Life is fragile. Stuff is fragile. We saw that in chapter 21 with the access to the wells. And it feels similar here with the purchase of this field, that stuff can be taken in a moment. Natural disasters, market crashes. Even the tears of the Chancellor can make the markets wobbly. Now, I'm not trying to make any point there apart from the fact that it just shows how fragile things are. Company failures, changes in government, poor decision making, different generations. Okay, this group of Hittites, they look at Abraham and they go, yeah, we're happy for you to have the field. Yeah, we're all in agreement. But what about in the generation that follows? They're going to let him keep the field? Stuff is perishing, and not least because we live in a world that is perishing. We live in a world where stuff wears out and breaks down, often when you're least prepared for it. And so what's the difference then? If this is the ordinary stuff that every person in the world faces, what difference does it make to be a person of faith? What's the difference between the person who doesn't have faith, the native, and the person of faith, the foreigner? Well, the difference is how we live in response to the trials. How do foreigners live in the fragile? Well, firstly, we live wisely among the natives. Do you notice how the Hittites refer to Abraham here in verse 6? Sir, listen to us. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will refuse you his tomb for burying the dead. Now, there might be a bit of flattery in here. They might be warming Abraham up because what they're going to do is do a bit of bartering over the price of the field. But there is also a great amount of respect for Abraham here. Sir, you are a great prince among us. Abraham says he's a foreigner and a stranger. They reply saying, yeah, you're a mighty prince among us. Okay, might not be one of us, but you are great among us. And maybe they're thinking about the victory that Abraham had over those 4 kings. Do you remember King Kedorlaomer back in chapter 14? Maybe they're thinking about the vast amount of wealth that Abraham has accumulated. Maybe they've heard from Abimelech, watch out for this guy, God's with him, he's a mighty prince of God among you. Whatever it is, it's clear that what Abraham has here is a good reputation amongst the people he is living. Which, let's be honest, has not always been the case, has it? Remember the 2 incidences of the tell them you're my sister? His reputation wasn't great with Pharaoh, and his reputation wasn't great with Abimelech. What is this that you've done? I think that should encourage us, friends. Because we can all reflect back, can't we, maybe even on this week, of times where we have not lived well amongst outsiders, where we've not lived well amongst the natives, where we have felt the sting of shame because we have done things we shouldn't have done, or we've not done things that we should have done, or we've said things that we shouldn't have done, or we've not spoken when we should have spoken, when we're very aware that we haven't honored Jesus in the way we should. And yes, we need to repent of that, but I also want to encourage you this morning that that does not mean your reputation has been lost forever. Faith over a period of time gets noticed, even if it's inconsistent. And it makes a difference, as it did here for Abraham. It's why in 1 Peter 2, when Peter has just described the people there as foreigners and strangers, foreigners and exiles, and he's warned them, abstain from the sinful desires that wage war against your soul, he goes into to encourage them, as foreigners and strangers, to live such good lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Isn't that what's happening here with Abraham? He's lived a good life amongst the pagans. They can see his good deeds and they're glorifying God. But notice why Peter says we should live like that. Why should we want to live wisely amongst the natives or the pagans or the outsiders? Well, not for our own reputation, not so people can say, hey, you're a great guy, I'm going to call you sir. And he says we do this for the glory of God. Not for our reputation, but for his. Not for our praise, but for his. Because we want him to be honored above all things. When things are fragile, we need to live faithfully. We need to live obediently so that we bring honor to God by showing people who it is that we really trust in. And that includes not obsessing over the fragile. Not obsessing over the fragile. We noticed a few weeks ago, didn't we, that from the time God has called Abraham, Abraham has been pretty much constantly on the move. Even in these last few chapters, Abraham secures a well in Beersheba, but now as Sarah dies, he's off in Hebron. He's moved again. And it's not like Abraham had to do this. It's not like he had to keep moving about, because he has got plenty of money. He was given loads of money from Pharaoh, loads of money from Abimelech. He got loads of money when he defeated the 4 kings. And we know he knows how to build stuff. He and his household servants, they've dug wells. But that is no small feat in ancient, 2,500 years ago. That's no small feat to dig a giant water well. He's got building skills. And he's in the land God had promised. Why not just build a house? Why not follow Cat Stevens' advice? Find a girl, settle down. If you want, you can marry. Look at me, I'm old, but I'm happy. Why couldn't he have done that? But no retirement home for Sarah. She dies in a tent. And her husband has to go and barter for some land just to bury her in. Now, I'm sure your hopes for your last season of life don't involve moving about from place to place in a tent. As Hazel has wonderfully demonstrated this morning, I can't even get her to Watford for a weekend. For many people in the UK, this kind of retirement and death would be absolutely shocking. Because we seem to think it's a right for us to be able to spend our later years resting in the place that we've secured, enjoying the people we want to enjoy, having a little bit of rest, a little bit of recreation, a little bit of travel, and we will get quite cross if someone suggests to us that we should be living our last season of life any differently to that, and we fall apart if something takes it away. And if that's not us yet, most people my age are working themselves to the bone trying to secure that kind of last season. But not Abraham and not Sarah. Why? Well, it's back to that part of the New Testament we keep being pointed towards here, isn't it? Hebrews 11, verse 8. Turn to it if you like. You'll find it on page 1209. Hebrews 11 and verse 8, page 1209. Why aren't Abraham and Sarah just trying to enjoy the good life? Why haven't they built a house and settled down? Verse 8, Hebrews 11, by faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he didn't know where he was going. By faith he made his home in the promised land. Like a stranger in a foreign country, he lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. This is the bit. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. Why not settle down? Why not enjoy the nice home? Because Abraham knows that this isn't his home. He doesn't want the earthly. He doesn't want the temporary. He doesn't want the fragile. He's waiting for the eternal. He wants the heavenly home that God is going to build for him. The one that God has promised him. And so he's not going to obsess over the fragile. Look, it's not wrong to have a home. It's not wrong to have savings. It's not wrong to enjoy good things. Abraham was very wealthy. You're not sinful if you've never moved, and you're not more holy if you've just spent your life moving around. But the question, I think, is, where is your source of joy? What is it that makes you feel secure? What are you living for, really? Are we obsessing, or at least over-focused, on the perishing and the fragile? I was asked the other day by someone, what do you think is one of the biggest barriers of people living faithfully for Jesus in your context? They mean in this part of the world. Honest answer, one of the biggest barriers, middle-class aspirationalism. Trying to secure the education, the career, the house, the car, the nice trips, the good experiences, the sporting achievements. I see it in myself and my family. I see it in a number of people sat here before me this morning. We need to realize that we are stewing daily in the values of this world. And as we stew in those, the danger is we absorb many of them without realizing. Be honest with yourself this morning. What drives you most of the week? What forces you to get out of bed in the morning when your alarm goes off, even though you really don't want to? Why is it you do the things you do? Why is it you spend money where you spend money? Why is it you spend time where you spend time? Where is your attention most of the time focused? Is it on the perishing and the fragile? Back to the opening question, what's the dream? What's the retirement dream? What do we hope for on the day of our death? Do we really live in this world as if we are foreigners and strangers? Do we really believe that this world is not our home? Do we really understand that our hope is not in the fragile, but in the eternal? But in the eternal. Because foreigners live by putting their faith and their hope in the eternal. Do you wonder why most of this chapter is taken up with this land negotiation? Okay? I mean, it's a very interesting insight into ancient Near East land negotiations, isn't it? I mean, Christian brought that out a little bit in his dramatic reading, but you've got this kind of back and forth of, oh, you don't need to give me any money. Oh, I would like to give you some money. No, I wouldn't hear of it. I couldn't possibly take any money from you. Well, I would like to give you some money. Okay, it's worth 400 shekels, please. well, that's actually quite a bit of money. In fact, I think I might be paying over market value for this bit of land. Well, what's that between me and you? No, you're quite right. Here's the money. Now, it's interesting, but why do we need to know it? Well, can you see? I think we're given a bit of a thing here where Abraham says at the end of verse 4, sell me some property for a burial site here so that I can bury my dead. It needs to be here. Abraham is absolutely determined to secure this land here and determined to bury Sarah in that land. To place her body in the land that God has promised him. And he's not alone in that. As we move through Genesis, the line of promise, what we call the patriarchs, they are all very determined to be buried in this same bit of land. So chapter 25, Abraham dies, he's buried in the same tomb as Sarah. Chapter 35, Isaac is buried in the same place. Chapter 50, Jacob dies in Egypt, but he insists that his body is taken back to the same tomb, to the same field, and buried in the same place as Abraham and Sarah. Joseph dies, and he is actually embalmed and buried in Egypt, but when the Israelites leave, he's told them to take his bones with him, and he gets reburied in the promised land. Why is this bit of land so important? Because it's the promised land. Because this is the land that God had promised to Abraham and his offspring. This is the land that God has said Abraham's people will live with God in his presence, enjoying his blessing. And it is the land from which God's blessing is going to go out to all the nations of the earth. Now, Sarah doesn't get to see the promise fulfilled. She dies without Abraham owning 1 square inch of this land. In fact, all the people I mentioned, Abraham, Isaac, Joseph, Jacob, they all die without receiving the promise of this land. But they are trusting in that promise. They are trusting in God to keep that promise. And so they want to be in the land ready for when God keeps that promise. Hebrews 11 continues, verse 13. All these people, the people I've just mentioned, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting, listen, that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they were thinking of a country they'd left, they would have had opportunity to return. Sarah died. Abraham could have taken her back to his homeland. He could have buried her there. He could have said, all right, that was a wild ride. I'm going to stay here and settle down. Verse 16, instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And remember last week, Abraham's a man who believes that God can raise people from the dead. Remember that with Isaac? He believes that God is a God who can bring people back from the dead. And there is another tomb in this same bit of land that someone is going to get buried in a few thousand years later. And that person is placed in that tomb having trusted God to fulfill his promises and to complete what he had begun in Abraham. And remember, he said, destroy this temple, by which he was talking about his own body, and I will raise it up again in 3 days. He said, I lay my life down only to take it up again. And as Jesus emerges from the tomb 3 days after he was put into it, he not only is the fulfillment of Abraham's faith in the resurrection, he is the fulfillment that God from this land is going to bless every nation on earth as the good news of salvation, as the good news of the life and death and resurrection and reign and return of Jesus goes out from this bit of land to every nation on the earth. And one day, when Jesus returns, when the risen Jesus returns, the dead are going to rise from their graves, and up are going to pop Sarah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and every other person who has died believing, trusting in the faith, in the promises, in the things they didn't yet see but they trust that God is going to bring, waiting and trusting for the promises to be fulfilled, waiting and trusting in Jesus, waiting and trusting that through him all of God's blessings are going to flow to them. That he is the one who is going to bring God's people into God's place where they will enjoy God's presence and his blessing for all eternity. Now you can say amen. Do you see Abraham in buying this field? He's putting his money where his mouth is. It's a down payment. It's an investment. I really do believe God is going to keep this promise. And I want to be here to see it. He doesn't put his faith in the fragile. He puts his faith in the eternal. It's why we're going to sing in a moment. Fading are the world's best pleasures, all their boasted pomp and show, solid joys and lasting treasures, none but Zion's children know. So what do you think? Hebrews 11 says God was pleased to call himself their God. Why? Because they are trusting in the eternal. Is God pleased to be called our God? Because we trust in the eternal and because we are living like strangers and foreigners in this world. Are we putting our money where our mouth is? What would it look like if all of us were truly living as foreigners and strangers? What difference would it make to how you view and use your possessions, your time, your careers, your families? What difference would it make to what you see as valuable and worthwhile? What difference would it make to how you see gathering together with God's people to pray and praise and learn about his word, to enjoy fellowship with one another? What difference would it make to your generosity? What difference would it make to where you invest your finances? Even in death, Abraham invests his wealth in the promises of God. Where's your wealth going when you die? To a random charity? Just to your private family? Or are you going to invest it in the promises of God? And you know this isn't a risky investment, right? You know this isn't like, some kind of hedge fund or cryptocurrency, and it's not like betting on the long shot at the Grand National. This is truly guaranteed. This investment will return to you 1,000-fold because it's already guaranteed by Jesus. It's already guaranteed because Jesus has risen. It's already guaranteed because he is the promised Son. The one through which all of God's promises are fulfilled and the one through which all of God's blessings flow to his people. True blessing never comes from the fragile. It only comes from faith in the eternal. It never comes from human effort. It only comes through the eternal Son of Abraham. And so that means we hold very lightly to the fragile, but we must hold very tightly to Jesus. Oh, we may not see it now. You may not see it this side of the grave. Sarah, Abraham, they only saw it from a distance. Hebrews 11, we may not receive the things promised, we may welcome them at a difference, but life for the foreigner is faith in the things that you do not yet see, but confident that they are secure and they are coming. That retirement dream, God hasn't given you a long life. And He hasn't given you lots of stuff so that you can have a restful and recreational last season of your life. He's given it to you to invest in His kingdom. He's given it to you to enable you to have time to strengthen your faith. He's given it to you so you can serve Him and His promises. He's given it to you so you can bring Him glory. He doesn't want you wasting any part of your life on just having a nice final 15 years. He has got something way more meaningful and glorious for you than that. That hope for the day of your death, peaceful, surrounded by your loved ones, in your comfortable home, leaving your nice legacy behind. Is that what you want? Or do you want your last day to be one where you are trusting in that which you haven't seen but you know is coming? Do you want your last day to be one where you are resting in the eternal, where you are not obsessing about the fragile, but content that you have used the days that God has given you to seek His kingdom and His glory, confident that all of God's promises are going to be yours in eternity? What do you want? I know which I think is the better death. I'll leave you to prayerfully consider what you want for yours. One of the things that will help us to do that is as we sing. We're going to sing of the eternal hope that is ours in Jesus. And both the songs we're going to sing now, and yeah, musicians, you can come up. Both the songs we're going to sing talk about Zion. Zion is a city. Sometimes it's talking in the Bible about this Jerusalem that's in the Middle East. But actually it's also used to point forward to the heavenly city that Abraham is waiting for and that we wait for too. But as I close, somebody sent me this morning. This is a friend of mine who likes to message pastors on a Sunday morning with something encouraging. And it's amazing that he sent this morning. He quotes Jeremiah 2. For my people have committed a double evil. They have abandoned me, the fountain of living water, the eternal, and they've dug cisterns for themselves, cracked cisterns that cannot hold water, fragile. Evil is described, abandoning the Lord as the source of life and true satisfaction, seeking our self-made inadequate sources of life and satisfaction. But being confronted with that truth should turn us to the Savior, who says, whoever drinks from the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. In fact, the water I will give him will become a well of water springing up inside him for eternal life. Do you want the fragile? Do you want the eternal?